If you associate anything with the Vikings, it's probably the raiding. Vikings were notorious for sailing up and down the coastlines of England and Western Europe and taking like everything they could get their hands on. But while Vikings are known for having a taste for shiny stuff in general, they especially liked silver and were known to steal silver specifically, which is why hoards of Viking silver keep popping up everywhere. And a particular hoard of Viking silver from northern England seems to have been a long way away from home. Some of it, researchers say, was mined as far away as Iran, which is kind of changing everything we know about Viking trade and expansion. So let's see what it was doing there. If you're a history nerd or a fan of any of the Norse-inspired media that's come out in recent years, you probably know that around the 9th century, Vikings did a lot of raiding in England and Western Europe, and also Ireland. Don't leave out Ireland. And also they sometimes did normal trading as well. Now they would not have called themselves Vikings, by the way. This is more of a verb that means to go out killing and stealing stuff when you have the time, you know, fun family stuff. But while they were after a lot of things, Vikings were specifically chasing after silver. See, under Scandinavian law, land and livestock were passed down according to strict inheritance rules. So if you were not one of the generational haves, you were one of the have-nots. The Vikings figured out that they could skirt those traditional rules by trading for or straight up stealing loads of stuff, creating a sort of nouveau riche warrior class. They still could not use it to buy land in Scandinavia because the strict inheritance laws locked outsiders out of the system no matter how well they could pay. They could trade that stuff though, creating a sort of status symbol which enriched them in other ways. Now Vikings are also known for their hoards. Basically, piles of buried treasure turning up anywhere you had Vikings. And while the idea of digging up buried treasure is lots of fun, it does raise some questions. Why were Vikings always burying their treasure in the first place? Well, the easiest answer is that Vikings hid their hoards to keep them from being found by others, maybe because they were in danger and needed to flee. They probably hoped that they could come back for their treasure later. Historians do think this explanation worked for a lot of hoards, but there are a few more interesting reasons why Vikings might have hidden their treasure. Some sources say Vikings buried their treasure for religious reasons, believing that a man would be able to use whatever treasure he buried once he made it to the afterlife. But since this particular bit of lore was written down after the Christianization of Scandinavia, it's worth treating with a grain of salt. Another possibility is that hoarding had to do with the display of wealth and power. Basically, if a leader wanted to appear generous and successful, he needed to show off a huge pile of money, one he was willing to hand out to his followers as well. That would mean stockpiling silver and keeping it hidden so that it would stay safe until it was ready to give out. And to get into this, we're about to talk about one hoard in particular. But first, a quick break.
Thanks for watching SciShow for the last 14 years. If you want to see us make it to the big 1-5, here's one thing you can do. Pause the video and go to complexly.org/support SciShow. Right now, 1 in every 10,000 people who watch our videos support us on Patreon. If 2 in every 10,000 supported us, we could afford to make SciShow for years to come. We want to keep SciShow going, and you are a vital part of that equation. So if you need a little more incentive, we have more to offer from March 13th through 27th. If you donate in that window, you can get a postcard and other special treats, like a steel X-ray crystallography spinner. See, now you have to go and find out about what that means. They're at complexly.org/support SciShow. Thank you.
Whatever the reasons, Vikings left a lot of hoards behind, and one of those hoards, the Bedale hoard, was found using metal detectors in Yorkshire in 2012. It was probably buried somewhere around the year 900, maybe earlier. The hoard contained several silver pieces, including an elaborate neck ring, some jewelry, and ingots that would have been used for exchange. To find out where these items came from, researchers turned to science, specifically chemistry. They decided to look into the impurities in the silver. They looked at 3 elements: gold, bismuth, and lead. Gold and bismuth impurities tend to get stuck in the silver even after it's refined. Bismuth is difficult to remove without destroying the silver, so most refining processes leave it in. And gold, Well, it's a noble metal, so it doesn't go anywhere at all. Since the amount of gold and bismuth that naturally occurs in silver varies depending on where the silver comes from or when it was mined, taking a look at those elements can tell us about where the silver originally came from. Lead also tells us an interesting story because its isotopes can really narrow down where in the world an ore comes from. And just to review real quick, isotopes are atoms of the same element with a slightly different number of neutrons, making them a tiny bit lighter or a tiny bit heavier. Some isotopes are stable, which means they don't decay with time, and others are radioactive, which means they do decay. Now, lead isotope analysis has been used to determine the provenance of metals since the 1960s, so it's a very old technique. People from the 1960s, I apologize for calling you very old. Now, this works because there are traces of lead in just about everything, and lead is a bit of an odd duck, isotopically speaking. Other metals usually have the same isotope ratio wherever they naturally occur, which means they always have about the same amount of heavier atoms compared to lighter atoms. But the isotopic proportions of lead differ depending on where it comes from. Why? Well, because of radioactive decay. Earth's crust is full of radioactive materials like uranium, thorium, and actinium, which are always decaying, shedding energy and transforming into other elements. And a lot of these decay chains eventually end in lead. We have a whole episode about it. It did really well. You should check it out. But the isotope at the end of each decay chain differs. So the uranium decay chain ends in lead-206, which is the isotope of lead that has 206 protons and neutrons. The actinium decay chain ends in lead-207, and the thorium decay chain ends in lead-208. That means that the final isotopic makeup of lead is highly dependent on the radioactive elements in the area around it. And since there are enough different possible combinations to make these distinct, lead isotopes can tell you a lot about where something is from. And since, by their very nature, isotopes all have different masses, a mass spectrometer can easily tell them apart from each other. So armed with their traces of gold and bismuth and their isotopic analysis of lead, the researchers set to work determining the origins of the Bedale hoard. But what they found surprised them. While a lot of silver did come from European sources, which is what they expected, about a third of the hoard came from Baghdad and Tehran. That's really surprising. You don't hear a lot of stories about Vikings raiding the Abbasid Caliphate. But while the group we now know as the Vikings didn't have any contact with modern-day Iraq and Iran, another group of Scandinavians did. The Rus. The Rus also left Scandinavia during the Viking Age, but while the Vikings went westward, the Rus went east into modern-day Russia and Ukraine. The Rus frequently met with merchants from the Islamic empires on the River Volga, trading furs and enslaved people in exchange for Islamic silver dirhams. We know that eventually dirhams from the Rus made it back to Scandinavia, but that was thought to happen much later, like a full century after the Bedale hoard was buried. And the discovery of silver in the Bedale hoard, a Viking hoard, suggests that trade between the eastern and western arms of the Scandinavian expansion was a lot more extensive than previously thought. Now, eventually, both the Vikings and the Rus activities stopped. In the east, Central Asia's silver mines dried up around 950, making trade with the Islamic Empire much less appealing for the Rus. And in the west, the Vikings gradually eased off the murder in favor of regular murder-free trade, although it did take them another century or so after that. But the Bedale hoard remains an unexpected example of just how far the Vikings spread, and we only know about it thanks to the powers of geochemistry and science.